Hey Creagears, and welcome back to the final video of our Alterna trio of custom amiibos. I know we are just a little bit late, but we still wanted to have a video out to celebrate the first anniversary of Splatoon 3. And what better way to celebrate than by finishing the collection with our very own Capt 3 custom amiibo from the story mode. For the first piece of our Capt 3 custom amiibo, we wanted to have her sit on a crate that we had gone to see in every story mode throughout the 3 games. Luckily for us, we already had some silica molds made for the Sockeye Station diorama with the few crates we had to make for that one. So we already had this laying around for yet another crate to add to this amiibo. This we could then combine with our repose of the Splatoon 1 Inkling Girl amiibo. Many of these customizations include having her in this sitting position, and second of all, we have her resting one hand over her legs and the other one will then have her supporting her leaning face. For this we did need to repose the head to have her face a little bit forward, and for the legs we were luckily able to at least use one of the legs for a bit of repurposing, so we don't have to make 2 whole legs. But before these additions could be made, we first needed to add another layer of epoxy clay to the base. This way we can cover the existing layer of ink and to have the clay fuse the base to the crate that we had cast before. Once these are placed together, we first start by filling all of the leftover support holes in the amiibo. After this, we worked on the new leg by wrapping a piece of clay around the aluminium wire that we had used as a base. After the leg first moved into the hips, we could then push the 2 blocks of clay onto the ends of the wire and smooth out the entry point. And these blocks are then fused into the legs to create the feet. After the feet, we moved up to the right arm of Capt 3. This is where we use a bit of clay to create a seamless transition between her shoulder and her upper arm that we were able to save from the original amiibo. Then we transitioned the new arm into the rest of the clay on her back that we had already applied as a filler. Before we go and add the clay for the second arm, by wrapping around the wire again and smoothing the 2 ends to the shoulder and the upper arm again. This way we were able to make Capt 3's body whole again. With this step done, we can then see how she's gonna look on top of her crate. But because of the raised edges of the crate, we did need to add some more clay to her upper legs and her butt. With that little extra bit of clay, we can then press her onto our brand new crate to have her permanently attached onto the crate once the clay has dried. And while she can then sit there to let the clay firm up a bit more, we can then use the leftover clay to make the top of Capt 3's cap. Although this was not as easy as it might look. Because of its very specific organic shape, it makes it so if the proportions of the piece or the general size are off, the whole thing just doesn't look right. With its thicker front and smaller back, on top of the proportions in comparison to the head of the Inklings themselves, it made it quite difficult to get it right. Especially since I need to keep checking the placement of the cap on top of her head to get the size right. Then, before we can let the clay cure completely, I check up on 3 one more time, smoothing out where she's pressed onto the crate to not have the clay squeeze out from underneath her, and finally also adding the little cuts into the feet to make the toes. Then we can let her dry, and after she has become completely firm, we can also add some of the accessories. Like these 5mm EVA foam cushions for the headset. Made from some ovals that I then chamfered with my scissors and finished up with a pass of sanding. And these are then glued onto where the ears used to be. Then we glue this 2mm thick, 5mm wide strip of craft foam around the base of the cap. Or, wait, it's probably better if I glue the circle onto the contours of the hat first, since I made the bottom of the cap pretty flat. Okay, let's do that. So once we have this circle complete, we can then mark out its contour onto the craft foam sheet. After which we can then draw out the visor and cut it out. Next we glue this to the front of the... wait. Apparently it's called a frame. So, the frame of the hat. Then we use this foam one more time to make the protruding parts of the headset. Or the fins of the headset. And lastly for the bottoms of the flip-flops. Huh. If I had $1 for each time I had to make open toes for a custom amiibo, I would have $3. I mean, it's not much, but it's weird that it already happened 3 times. And with a 1mm wide strip of foam for the... strap. Okay, for the straps of the flip-flops. Since the foam already has a thickness of 2mm, which we can't really change without messing with the foam too much, we flip the straps onto its sides to have the 2mm thickness become the width, and vice versa with the new 1mm thickness. Carefully gluing this behind the toes, and making sure to have the pointed end start from the split in between the big toe and the toe next to it. No, apparently it doesn't have a general name. Surprising. But, back on subject. After we got the straps glued down, we at last glued the other side of the band to the bottom of the cover. So that's what the base of the hat is called. Then all that's left is for the tank of her Splatoon 1 hero shot. Since most of this weapon we were able to make with some small pieces of MDF wood, square chopsticks, dowels and bamboo skewers, the tank has such an organic shape that we could only make it from clay. Speaking of clay, since we now have all of the accessories on and the clay is dried, we can finally add the last of the clay details, Captain 3's patched up poncho. So, with another sheet of clay, we place this on top of 3's body and check where we can remove some of the sheet. Once we almost have the correct shape, I used a flat silicone tool to press it in between the already made parts of 3's body to fit the poncho. Making sure to leave lots of wrinkles since the fabric is already very loose fitting and even worse when she sits down. But because of the arm, we can't have it placed down as one solid piece. So, once I have the torso part done, I grab one of the leftover pieces that I ripped off earlier and add the frayed edges and one straight edge to the clay. Then I use the tool to squeeze the straight edge underneath her leaning arm and to drape the frayed edges over her legs. Then, while leaving the sides open, very important part, we also add the matching piece to her back, including the fitting frayed edges on that piece too. And watching out that the poncho itself drapes down enough to show her t-shirt underneath. Lastly, I combined the two pieces onto her shoulders. And finish this piece with a bow on her left shoulder. Finally, now that we also have the white primer base added, I can start on the painting. And finally, we remember to record ourselves adding the faded yellow as the ink color.
Sure. Hey. Away.
Not only there, we also added to the buttons of the flip-flops and the base of the headset. And after a layer of black, I also added this yellow to the highlights of the hero shot. Then next for free is a light grey for our t-shirt. And when I say light grey, I mean light grey. It was so close to the white of the primer that I had a hard time even seeing which parts I had already painted and which are still open from the primer. Luckily, the black is a lot easier to see, especially in parts like our shorts, which gives us another part to add some frayed edges. Or stuff like the cushions and the fins of the headset.
You ready?
But not only did we need some black as a color, we also needed some as a base coat for the metallics, like around the frame and the visor of the cap. Even on this 10mm white emblem on the front. And lastly, we have the soles and the straps of the flip-flops. Next, we go a little lighter again with the dark gray for her longer sleeves. Luckily, we can forget these troubles a little while we add the first of the 3 coats of orange to the box. Painting very carefully, so close to the ink and behind 3's feet. Don't want to get orange on the yellow. Ugh. That would take another 5 coats. With that orange on, and even a little orange patch already painted onto the poncho, the next color to add is going to be a moonlight yellow mixed with a little bit of dark brown. This will then be added from the shoulders to meet the orange patch on the front, and stop around the middle part of the back of the poncho. And since we don't meet it on the front, thanks to the arm, we can even already add the first layers of the dark blue on the ends of the poncho. This dark blue can then also be added to the cover of the cap, making sure that we don't paint over the light blue patch. But as you can see, this dark blue doesn't really cover all that well. So that's why we said we're probably going to need like a few coats to get some good coverage.
You ready?
We then continue to work on the back of the poncho with a wizard's rope, or a dark teal, to the lower left.
Nemo.
And then a dark brown for the lower right. And once both have dried, we can add the final light blue patch between all 4 colors. But before we continue with the light blue, we first need to add their base with a dark blue. This we use to add the dotted pattern on both the hero headset and the flip-flops. After that's done, we add the very tiny light blue dots on top of the already added dark blue dots on the straps of the flip-flops. These two combine to create the effect of the glowing camo dots that we can see on all of the hero weapons and on the Splatoon 1 hero headset. With all of the straps dotted, we continue onto the fins of the aforementioned hero headset. Finishing up these accessories with their own dotted pattern spreading inwards from the base of the headset. Then we use the same technique on the hero shot with its dark blue base on the nozzle and the tank. Next, while that dries, we add some gunmetal bolts and pipe details. After which the dark blue has dried enough so we can add the light blue dots on top. With the hero shot finished, we can go back to 3 by using the white paint to add the Squid Peak Splatoon logo on both sides of the crate. Carefully painting around all of these raised details from all of the wooden panels. This same white is then also used for some very tiny stitches on the cap. But before we can also use it on her eyes, we first need to add the black to add her eye mask. Even getting myself into a tough spot by having to add the black behind her supporting hand. Ooh, that's a difficult one. Especially with a visor also, in a way. However, we managed to add this black. But since this has to dry first, we are currently better off first adding the golden details onto the cap. Like the buttons on the side, the edge of the visor, and the tiniest Squid League Splatoon logo I ever painted on the emblem. And finally, the golden edge around the lower half of the frame of the cap. Finally, we add the whites to our eyes. Again, with that stupidly hard to reach place behind her hand. We then follow this up with some more dark brown for the exaggeration of some of the creases, like her mouth, the space between her fingers, and most importantly, between the toes. That made it so that the white has dried enough so we can add the blue to her eyes. With a light blue base, followed up with a normal blue and finished with a dark pupil. Lastly, we can start on the gradient of her tentacles. With Splatoon 3's new technique of the opposing color on the color wheel instead of the darker shades that they used to use. So we can use the fact that the dark blue doesn't really cover that well to layer it in such a way that we get a gradient from the base yellow to the tips with darkest blue. Although we do not only use paint, we also mix the miniature paints with some water to dilute it even more, but for the base we just used mostly just the dark blue. But as soon as we got this down, we then add some normal blue dots on top to finish the gradient. After which, we finish the tentacles with a mummy's robes for the bottoms of the tentacles. And for some scars that we had cut into Captain 3's tentacles before we added the primer. Although, if I made her again, I would probably mix a little blue in between the mummy's robes to have them fade in a little bit more with the rest of the tentacles, to not make them seem so new, I guess? For now, we can just finish this project with a layer of gloss on tentacles, the emblem, on her eyes, the fins of the hero headset, the matching texture on the flip-flops, and we finish this off with a little bit of gloss for the tiniest bit of ink showing underneath the crate. And with that, we've completed another set of custom amiibos with the completion of our Alterna trio with our brand new Captain 3 custom amiibo. Hey Creagears, Robo here, and with that, we finished the Alterna trio amiibos. And what perfect timing to have the final one match up so close to the anniversary of Splatoon 3. Not at all, it was just pure coincidence. I even had this video planned for next Sunday, but I guess doing it today was even better. Especially with Alterna Marie also being released exactly 2 weeks ago. So it even works out very well with that. But now comes the big challenge. The rest of the Return of the Mammalians amiibos before we start on the big diorama. I really hope I can get those mega amiibo bases done in time.
Amiibo.
Whoops. Can't say any more on that because that's gonna be spoiler territory. So with that, we have to go now. Keep those creative gears turning, and we will see you guys in the next video. Wow, Mina, you really turned around on those amiibo numbers. Creagears, please send help.